Welcome to a new episode of People and Purpose podcast by GMG. Today's guest probably is coming straight on point to the current market climate and the one question that many people ask: what's happening next in businesses and personally? So, join me in welcoming Tanisha, our CFO at GMG, to talk all things numbers. Good morning, Tanisha. How are you today?
I'm very well, Razan. Thanks for having me today.
It's a pleasure. Like I said, I think our podcast today is coming at a time when a lot of our listeners are probably asking a lot of questions. Some are asking what's happening in business. Some are actually asking what's the impact on our personal life because of the business condition. So I think before we deep dive into such a diverse, complex topic, maybe you give us a quick background on who Tanisha is. How did you get into this topic of finance? And obviously, you come from very different markets and different industries. So maybe a quick snippet to how Tanisha landed in front of me in an episode like this today.
Okay, so I'm Tanisha Govindarajan. I'm a very simple, humble person. I got into finance because I believe math and numbers are my thing since childhood. I always wanted to be in finance. Indian by birth, traveled the world, worked in India, Singapore, and Philippines. Worked across American organizations, British organization, and French company. So out and out FMCG specialist, if you want to call it that. Worked in food, beauty, and alcobev. Yeah, so it's been quite a fulfilling journey so far until you spotted me and got me to GMG. What excites me about GMG is the diverse, kind of businesses that we have, the real rich heritage that we have, the history that we have. And I strongly believe this group has a strong future, and it's up to us to create that future together.
You have joined us very recently, and you were barely getting your head over the water when the geopolitical situation occurred. And obviously, that has impacted different organizations in different ways. How does your experience, let's say, resonate with the current climates? What parts of your experience do you think are coming into true test or support to the current condition at GMG and from the knowledge of the current market?
Okay, I think world has gone through a lot of turmoil even in the past. I think since the time I got into the corporate world, the first starting with the financial crisis of 2007-8, then there was COVID, and of course there is this now. No one expected this to start right now with the current what's happening even in the month of June. But I believe, world has always gone through a lot of crises in the past. Uncertainty is the only thing that is certain. We say it's the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But there are newer terms to it, which is Bani and a lot of new things. But irrespective of whatever you want to call it, the ground principle remains the same, which is after every few years, there will be a change which comes nicely or not in a nice way. What remains for any organization is to relook at your cost structures, business models, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, bring people together, keep them engaged, be honest about it, give them the clarity that is required, and focus on what we really need to build together for the future.
But when you say uncertainty, right, how do you communicate and give direction in times of uncertainty?
Yeah, it is difficult, to be honest, okay? But it's not impossible. So the starting point always remains the same, which is, be fact-based, based on fundamentals, based on what you know, because what you don't know, no one knows. But if you have enough information to make a reasonable decision, I think it's important for people to, bring it all together, make a decision, move on, and then course correct as we fine tune, based on the new information or the new changes which come up in the market. So that's the starting point. But I would say at a very fundamental core level, when something like this happens, people are very uncertain, people are quite jittery. So, as a leader, the most important thing for all of us to do is to first give clarity to our teams. What are we doing? What we know, what we don't know? How are we going to solve this? And we are in this together. Second would be to really have focused efforts on driving actions on the ground, which is to say, be it cost control, be it business model, be it cash flow planning now. As you said, cash flow is built on a budget. Now, budget is history, right? So, and what your forecast is going to be evolving. So, how do you plan a cash flow based on that is quite a difficult task, but it's not impossible. So, you need to have scenarios, you need to be able to bring people together, what needs to happen in each of those scenarios, and then take actions accordingly.
You know, in most employee engagement surveys, psychological safety usually comes as one of the highest pointers that employees usually comment on. But usually that comes from within the organization, right? Right now, the climate is kind of dictating a lot of the actions organizations take. Do you believe there are risk mitigation actions that an organization can take to reassure the people about those next steps happening so that they can continue being productive?
For sure. So, the starting point, imagine, put yourself in the shoes of any employee. First is about family safety, then financial stability, then work pressure, and then overall economic uncertainty around everything that's happening. So I think what any employee would expect from the organization is to, give me clarity, what's happening in the organization, what it means for me, and how do I move ahead. Right? So I think that's where we play a critical role to bring that clarity and direction to our teams. Once they have the clarity, at least they know what they are running after, what they need to do, and how they can contribute to, the entire, actions that we are taking right now. And beyond that, I think organizations, even in the worst scenarios, see who are the people who truly contribute, who are the people who are with you, who can actually bring a lot of new ideas, a lot of, I would say, new ways of working. And then eventually we'll be able to, sail through these tough times. The starting point of psychological safety is to always have an honest conversation. When people feel heard, people feel seen and understood, and they are equally able to understand the other person, that's where the psychological safety starts.
Do you believe that the ways of doing financial planning from a commercial standpoint change during conditions like this? Is agility, or I presume agility is a key factor that needs to be there, but do you feel that there's a new skill set that teams have to build to be able to be proactive? Because generally, commercial financial planning is a long-term plan.
I fully hear you and understand. So basically, I would say it's evolution of the finance function itself. And I think it's not just due to the current, let's say, geopolitical environment, but even otherwise, there's been a generational shift. Historically, finance was largely accounting, bookkeeping, producing facts. From there, in the last few years, finance has significantly moved on to being business partners, to right now being at the forefront and being the co-pilot along with the business teams, along with the CEO. What it means for us practically on the ground is, being as aware of the business and the market, and adding your knowledge of the financial, ecosystem to that to be proactively able to drive decisions. So that's what I would say, would be a key skill for any finance person, be it commercial finance, treasury, or even operations finance. That would be a key skill set that is required for the future.
But then, now you're touching my soft spot, which is, being all consumer centric. With the evolution of finance, there has been an evolution of the consumer. So we talked about millennials, and those are probably now mostly the ones sitting in senior roles. As Gen Zers come into that business, do you believe that the change in finance is impacted by the change in habits in the consumers leading financial functions or contributing to the financial functions?
Okay, quite an interesting question. I would see, for me, honestly, a millennial, a Gen Z is just generational terms. People are people.
Oh, their habits are so different.
For sure, for sure. Habits are different, but that's the beauty of bringing people together. The way I see Gen Zs, they are very talented. They know how to draw boundaries, and they're extremely passionate when engaged well, when engaged properly. Millennials come with their own strengths, which is to say they are resilient, they're quite disciplined, but probably they are more tolerant, and that's where I think these two teams coming together would actually add a lot more value. I would say a Gen Z is far more honest about their opinions, far more direct, and they would actually say, no, this doesn't work, right? And having that honest conversation is important. And a millennial with their experience can actually say, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming, and this is how probably we need to. So I think leaders really need to be able to take diverse opinions, hear people out, and then take a step forward, which is in the best interest of everyone and the organization.
I know you're a business finance person, but on a personal level, you said you were born with numbers, math, and all of that, but surely that translated also in a way of living, right? The way that you think of numbers is probably very different to a marketeer like I historically was, right? For all of those people outside wondering how differently they should manage their finances, is there something particular that you would advise them to do? Or you would just say, live your life and, just keep your savings to the side like our parents used to tell us?
No, I think, based on my experience and through various ups and downs of life, I would advise three things to anyone at any age, at any part of life. One is don't panic. Okay, so I think a lot of people take panic actions out of fear, getting out of the market or trying to change jobs or trying to move countries overnight, which is action out of panic. So first is don't act out of panic. Second, I would say is don't be in ignorance also. Don't, there are no safe havens. There are no jobs which are safe. There are no companies which are fully safe. So you have to be realistic about what's happening around. So I would say don't go to any of the two extremes. But one thing which most people miss is, never miss a good crisis. So during a crisis is where generational wealth also gets created. So right now there are some phenomenal stocks which are out there at very reasonable prices. If someone really wants to create generational wealth,
that's the time.
Now is the time. Also for businesses, so again, never miss a good crisis, which is necessity is the mother of invention. So right now, relook at models, think about what really works for the future. Consumer trends are changing. Right? The consumer mindset is changing, with a lot of Gen Zs coming in, with what's happening in the market. So we as business also need to evolve along with what's happening with our consumers. So I think now is the best time to reinvent and actually be in line with, where the business is and where the consumers are.
You said one of the reasons that GMG had interested you is the diversity of the business. In times like these, how has this diversity been bringing sanity to your life? How do you believe that this diversity supports a group financial head deliver the group's agenda?
I think diversity is good for the group. So right now, when let's say the geopolitical situation started, good for us, we have food as a division, health and beauty as a division, because these are divisions which are lesser impacted than, let's say, a sports, which is driven by tourists, which is driven by key locations. We have a huge history on sports. We are one of the significant market leaders in this region. But dependence on this division would have actually taken us down. So good for us, we have a diverse portfolio, but each business has its own challenges, pros and cons. So right now, supply chain disruptions are huge, right? So we have business, but the costs are really shooting up. So we really need to take actions on how do we bring costs down, things which is within our control, which is beyond our control, and what do we do about it. So to be honest, for me, it's been quite exciting. I enjoy these conversations. Having different businesses gives a wider perspective about how the same situation impacts different scenarios, different businesses. So to be honest, it's the diversity is actually our strength.
Now, when it comes to financial mistakes, you know, in marketing, it's easy to hide it. In HR, it depends where you find it. In finance, in general, and I'm talking here obviously on a strategic front, what do you feel are the largest financial mistakes that organizations sometimes take, whether it's in a natural climate or in challenging climates?
See, mistakes are inherent. Okay, so I think
100%.
there's no, I would say, taking an informed decision is important. Then trying to make that decision, fall in its right place is equally important. But the most important thing is to know, okay, fine, things are not working out. Cutting losses is equally important. Making dispassionate decisions and, knowing where to actually stop and move on is what is critical. So I think making mistakes is not an issue. Knowing them at the right time and correcting them at the right time is important. And that's where I think a lot of people miss, right? Because across all the organizations, even strong MNCs, mistakes happen, and it's not because financial soundproofing wasn't done. It's because it's based on some assumptions, on some consumer trends, on some market information. When you actually go ahead with it, you realize things have changed or our capabilities are different than what we thought of. And eventually you need to make a sound assessment of, do we still continue to put efforts, or do we kind of take a step back and do a different action. So I think that's where some organizations falter, because people become very passionate about the first decision and stick on to it. It's more important to just figure out when is the right time.
Okay, I have a big one here. You say some companies are financial focused, some organizations are more people focused. Fundamentally, the two functions are very important in any organization, right? But when they define an organization as number focused, a number is two main areas within a business. There's the P&L owners, and then there's finance. And you rightfully said that in the evolution of finance, you have moved into financial partnering, right? How do you describe the marriage between the ownership of a P&L from a control versus achievement? How to ensure that it actually materializes?
Okay, great question. So I would say this is similar to bringing accountability with sound long-term judgment, which is predominantly the value creation concept, which is how do you ensure short-term results without losing sight of long-term objectives, right? So, of course, as a P&L owner, the business would say, this is the cost I need to incur to drive this top line, and this is the resources I need. Fine, there is a ROI concept, and there's only so much you can beat about a ROI. The larger story is, if this is what we do, how does it impact our long-term objectives, long-term KPIs, and what are we really driving for the business for the long term? Right? I think having that clarity and alignment is very important. Then this whole concept of finance versus business or finance versus P&L owners, it doesn't exist, because our objective is same. Everyone wants the company to do well. Everyone wants the business teams to deliver the numbers, both top line and bottom line, and we all want to make money.
Fair enough. What is your vision for GMG? So when you took on that role, aside from how interesting it sounded to you, you must have had a vision to where you want to take yourself and the organization. What is that vision? I'm sure it was interrupted very shortly after your arrival, but still there was a vision, and hopefully as things progress and move, that vision can still materialize.
So I would say my vision, first starting with finance and of course then for the business and the group, I would say the vision for finance was largely to actually transform finance to the next level. As I said, from business partnering to being a co-pilot. This is a huge group. There's a huge history. We have a good foundational system, which is SAP and few others. But I still feel, we have still not fully utilized all our resources. So I think that's the starting point. Second would be to drive finance transformation with automation and AI. There's a lot of scope. There are a lot of things happening. We have sitting on a huge data mine of our own in-house information. So this is a great place to actually play around with what are the future possibilities with our own data. And the third would be to be build future ready teams, which is we have good source of talent. We have some phenomenally strong people. How do we really build them for the future? How do we ensure they are able to have holistic experiences, well-rounded experiences, not just from a technical standpoint but also from a leadership standpoint, and take this forward together as a team. So for the group, our vision is make this a truly global well-being powerhouse, right? So we have a plethora of brands, a huge range of divisions. Then it's about how do we really take this forward and make this global? How do we make this stand out for not just for this region, but also across our markets, including in Asia, including in the other places that we want to expand in the future?
Amazing. Thank you very much, Tanisha. My questions, I think, pretty much covered everything in a time that our listeners would want to be listening. So if you'd like to add anything to our listeners today, please feel free to add to anything that I've asked for you. If not, we can apparently get trending.
I think you pretty much covered a lot of things. I would say just one thing, I think uncertainty is the only thing that is certain, so I think people need to be just grounded, believe in yourself, focus on building skills, because that's the most important thing. And just surround yourself with the right people. That's the most important thing.
Amazing. Okay, let's do those rapid fives. You're in finance. What's your most challenging function?
Challenging function?
Yes.
Always commercial.
Mine is finance.
Always commercial.
Commercial teams. God, if you weren't in finance, where would you be?
Maybe I would be in the mountains paragliding.
If Tanisha was to do one thing differently in her life, what would that be?
I would be kinder on myself.
Okay. And how do you feel about marketing?
I like marketing. I'll tell you why. Because, they sell a story, they sell a hope. And that's why commercial can do its numbers. That's why finance can also churn those numbers.
Oh, amazing. Night or morning?
Morning for coffee, night for work.
So no time for sleep?
No, actually my brain is super productive at night.
So you're both a morning bird and an evening owl.
Yeah.
Tanisha, it was lovely having you today. Thank you very much for a very insightful session. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of People and Purpose podcast by GMG.